Powered by Rev Media in partnership with TSN. This is season 5, and I'm pretty sure it's episode 39. Could be 38, 37, I don't know, of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, and is presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, who have introduced the first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series, CC 15-year-old Sherry Cass, a signature CC Classic 12-year-old whiskey, finished with a secondary aging in Oloroso Sherry Cass. And after a couple of episodes with the O-Dog Jeff O'Neill, Ray Ferraro has returned to his rightful perch. We'll talk about the All-Stars part of headlines coming up in just a moment here, Ray. Just as important, though, the golf trip. How was the golf trip? The very reason why, you had earned a couple of episodes off of Ray and Dregs last week.
Well, apparently it's been cold in Arizona. We got out there and it was 78 Fahrenheit for 4 days in a row.
Perfect.
Oh, it was amazing. Like shorts, golf shirt, little sweater in the morning, boom, perfect weather. 12 guys, played 36 holes a day. Played well enough to get to the payout window.
Good for you.
Every round. I'm a dangerous 7 handicap. I play like well for like 14 holes, and then I have 4 doubles that blow my score up. Happens all the time. It's so frustrating, but it's really good for these sort of things.
Oh, for sure it is.
And it was just so fun. And then got to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while, and then jumped on a flight Thursday to get to Toronto for Thursday night. And got there, the draft was started, and did the skills the next day, and the game on Saturday, flew home Saturday night.
So O'Neill and I were very jealous about your golf trip, but he also knows how invested you are, not just in your game. I mean, Jeff is a very serious golfer. I mean, he's
good too.
He's like a
one or two, maybe.
Two.
Yeah, he's really good.
But he's like, all right, here's what Ray and that group are doing. They're playing 36 a day. They're walking, all of this. He's like, I can't do that. Like, he's like 18 holes. I need a cart. Nah, I just want to hit the ball and get to the next hole.
This one though, we I think because it's January, we did ride. So the 36 holes was far easier than the trudge around for 12 miles while you're trying to find your ball and hit the damn thing.
No kidding. All right, how about a little housekeeping before we just move on into headlines? And speaking of the O-Dog, right? So first episode that he joined me in, so a week ago, last Tuesday, near the end, we're just wrapping up the pod, and I'm like, hey, by the way, do you have any Ray Ferraro stories from back in the day when you would have played against each other? 3 guesses as to the story that he shared about maybe your first interaction on the ice?
Well, it had to be, because I had never seen him before. Because it's not like, right? Like, it's not like now. I mean, here's this 18-year-old kid that shows up in Hartford, and I'm in Los Angeles. Like, we never saw them. We never, right? I never even knew who Jeff O'Neill was. And
there's no Twitter, there's no internet.
No, and the only reason I know this is he's brought this up. I know it's got to be this story, but he's brought this up, and I just laughed. I don't remember it, but O's got that round face. Even when he was like a young kid, he just got a round face. And I guess there was a scrum, and I looked at him and I puffed out my cheeks at him, like, what are you doing here, little hefty fella? And I just puffed my cheeks out at him, and I guess he was so rattled, but I didn't even know who he was. I just, beat it. Who are you? You're, go away.
His recollection of that story to the detail is incredible. So no, just fair game. We wanted to be able to clear the air. No hard feelings. Jeff is good about it. You're good about it. So
yeah, it's so funny. Like we started working together, and he goes, first time we met, and just the way he tells us, he kind of goes like this, and then he tells a story. I was dying. I thought it was so funny.
He has a story like that, though, about so many different people, like players that he played with, players that he played against, coaches that he played for. I mean, his ability, again, to recall every single minute detail of those experiences. He's got a mind like a steel trap.
I wish I could remember the guy. I can't, but he scratched himself from a game, and O would come in from warm up, and the guy's getting his gear off, and O's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I can't play. I've got the sniffles." And Jeff said, "The what?" And the way he tells the story that this guy scratched himself from an NHL game with the sniffles, but I can't remember the player's name. It's
the mannerisms, right?
Yeah.
It's the faces that he makes, the gestures that goes into the storytelling. Phenomenal stuff. So he was excellent, by the way, in pinch hitting.
Of course he would be. Awesome. Thanks, O.
All right, time for headlines, Ray, brought to you by Tim Hortons. They're celebrating 60 years of keeping it fresh with the return of the 4 iconic retro donuts, all delicious. The Dutchie, of course, the blueberry fritter, cinnamon sugar twist, and last but not least, walnut crunch. Available right now for a limited time only at Tim Hortons. So London City Police held a press conference on Monday confirming charges against the 5 players from Canada's 2018 World Junior Team, the result of an investigation from an alleged sexual assault in London, Ontario in June of 2018. None of the allegations against the players have been proven. The case will return to court on April 30th, so we will just kind of stay away from any of the legal discussion on this until, again, the case progresses or we have more information to pass along. Meanwhile, in other news, Ray, man, you missed a busy week, which isn't a bad thing, but, we're going to give you the opportunity to catch up. But before we talk about the trades and the firing of Todd McLellan in LA, you, as mentioned, did come back from your golf trip to be part of, a mass broadcast. That's what it was. The NHL All-Star over the weekend here in Canada, of course, and on ESPN, etc. I thought it was entertaining from my spot in my living room. I can only imagine that you would feel the same way based on what you saw front and center in Toronto.
I thought they did a great job. From the celebrity captains to bringing back the draft, which I think can always be a little better, but it was great to have some interaction with the captains and the players and picking the teams and all that.
Yeah.
The skills I thought was outstanding. I loved it. I don't know how you can't be, not amazed probably isn't the right word, but just impressed with how much better Connor McDavid is than all the other best players in the world. Like to watch him when he turned up the speed, the way he had to go through the obstacle course, to watch it live, you're like, you could see with each stride he was faster than the other guy.
Yeah.
Like it just was so impressive. And I loved it. I mean, Kucherov had a brutal day, and I wish he would have tried harder after the thing went south on him. But I talked to him the next day. He was on the bench during the game, and he had this tape job. Like he'd wrapped his stick, and it had like big gaps in the tape. It looked like he didn't even try to put it on. It's white tape. He doesn't use that. And I said, "What are you doing there?" He goes, "Did you see my day yesterday?" He goes, "I had to change something." And then he scored. So it was good for him. The games were good. The same as, the 3-on, they always start, the first game's a little loose. Second game seems to be a little more intense. The championship game is the best. And the goalies were great. I thought it was a really, really good weekend. I really did. I think it went over well. I think the players had fun. It was good. It was a good weekend.
It did seem to have full buy-in. It really did, which is imperative to have any level of success, because normally the takeaway from All-Star Weekend is, okay, what was the jewel of the weekend? And the expectation going in was that it was going to be the skills competition. But I think your assessment is very honest of the games, because even the players after the final acknowledged that there was some nerves going into that championship. Is there anything about it that you would improve?
Yeah, you know what I would have liked to have seen. What anybody does, and in this case, we're talking about Connor McDavid with the $1 million for the skills. I would have loved to have seen them have like each player designate a charity that is going to get $100,000. And every charity of the 12, because there was 12 players in the skills, gets a minimum of 10,000. And so each charity has a representative there. Yeah. And the award is given to the person that wins the skills. He gets his big check, but it would be for 500,000, right? And or 600,000, and 100,000 would go, or 250,000 rather, goes to the selected charity. And then they have a draw in the stands, like a random draw, that 10 people get $25,000. Ooh. And it's just like, I don't know. I just think I think that would be really kind of cool, and really, it's the same amount of money, costs the same amount for the insurance companies of the sponsors and all that. But I think that would be pretty cool. I do have to say 2 players I want to point out, because I had a brief chat with both of them, Boone Jenner and Frank Vetrano. And both of them were like smiling ear to ear to be there. They both, Jenner's his 11th year. Yeah. He said, I never thought I would be here. He scored 2 goals. Vetrano was like, this is so awesome. And he scored. And I don't know. I just felt, I see stories like that, and I'm like, I cheer for those guys. I think that's just the best. They had just a great time. And important. And that's an excellent reason why you continue to fight to have, every team in the league represented, right? They're not all going to be superstars. They're not yet. Jenner broke his jaw, missed 15 games, but he's the leader of the Columbus team, and Vetrano's got 22 goals. I mean, these guys should be recognized. And it could always be, you could have it for a very few players. Guess what? Next year, you're going to have it for very few players. And people are going to complain that it's not enough. And I think they did the best with it they can in a 32 team league to get the most players involved that you can. All right. Big news in Los Angeles. And we touched on this with the O-Dog last week. It was literally happening as we were recording the episode. The LA Kings fire head coach Todd McLellan on Friday. Now, I want to remind you, Ray, January 18th, Rob Blake, the general manager, comes out, meets the media, and basically ruled out a coaching change at that point. He said at the time that his plan was to rely on the players and the leadership to get them out of the mud. So that just tells you the level of pressure, not only on the general manager in this case, but senior management, maybe ownership, recognizing, okay, well, January 18th, we still felt like we were a game or two from turning this thing around. Now we're drifting into February. There's still plenty of hockey left. We're a playoff team or better. We were going to have to do something drastic, and it ends up costing Todd McLellan his job. Yeah, so I always have this feeling when a manager, like in this case Rob Blake, comes out and gives that vote of confidence, I'm not firing the coach. First of all, what else is he going to say? You can't very well say the coach has got 8 games, and if we don't win 6 of them, then you can't do that. And so at that time, obviously, there were discussions that things had to turn quick. Now, I did a game out there in Nashville, would have been maybe like a few days after that. Yeah. And Blake and McLellan had met with the coaches, and they had gone over a bunch of video about things that needed to change. Like when the GM is in the video meetings, everybody's well aware of the importance of the next little while. And so they make the coaching change, and Todd's a very good coach. He's a terrific guy, and he's a very, very good coach. What I found really interesting about the firing was that Blake said immediately, I'm aware of the implications of this firing for all of us. Right. Like, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm protecting myself here. He's saying if we don't get in, we're probably all under the microscope here.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be a better team. They started great. They stumbled. There's probably lots of reasons for it. One of Jim Hiller's, the new coach's number one jobs is to somehow, some way engage Pierre-Luc Dubois. Cam Talbot has to find his game again. Had a great start, was in the All-Star game. He's been less than average for about 6 weeks now. Like they've got a number of guys that have fallen off the mark. They're going to get Victor Arvidsson back, and I guess he'll help, but man, he hasn't played this year, so that's going to be hard too.
Yeah. What do you make of the addition of DJ Smith to the coaching staff?
Not surprised that they would add another coach. Not surprised it would be somebody that was a head coach. DJ and so Jim Hiller would have some input. They're not just going to drop a guy from the moon on the bench beside him. And Jim and DJ worked together in Toronto when DJ was the assistant there. So the familiarity of that is probably somewhat comforting. But now you've got a recent NHL head coach standing there too.
All right, couple of big trades that came across our desks last week as well. Two of the top centers in the market moved. Elias Lindholm goes to the Vancouver Canucks from the Calgary Flames. Sean Monahan from Montreal to the Winnipeg Jets. First-round draft picks, Rays, included in both of those deals. Again, not overly surprising, but two substantial adds, I would say, for both the Canucks and the Jets.
Yeah, well, so the first one that went down was the Vancouver deal, and it makes a sense from so many different ways in Vancouver. They're top-heavy left-handed in their lineup. All of their centers are left-handed. Lindholm is not. He's right-handed. He plays the center, plays the wing. He's a 55% face-off guy. So this is a significant addition. His numbers are way down this year in Calgary. When you play on a team where you can see that the important days are not today. The future is what they're starting to look at. If you're a veteran guy and you're in the position of Lindholm where you're at the end of your contract and both sides probably realize you're going to move on at the end of the year, not much, 10% maybe, your energy goes down, your engagement goes down, and I suspect he'll be really good in Vancouver. He'll play with Elias Pettersson, which will be a nightmare for Elias playing with Elias. They've got two guys named Nils. Like, this is going to be a tough team to broadcast. But I think Lindholm will do really well because of his handedness. He's right-handed. He plays in the bumper spot on the power play. He can play out on the wing, like on the one-time side. Gives him some pliability in their lineup. It's a good move. Monahan, that trade happens quick because there's only a few teams that are really in the mix for those centers. Yeah. And once one goes, look out. There's not many. And so everybody starts to fight over who's got the best deal to make. And Monahan, like Winnipeg had a big hole behind Mark Scheifele. So now they got a right-hander, they got a left-hander. Monahan can play up and down the lineup. He's been healthy, which is always a concern, or has been a concern for him. So I think a really terrific move for Winnipeg too. I got to say this though. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton in Montreal, when they acquired Monahan from Calgary, they got a first-round pick to take on his contract. Right. When they traded him, they got a first-round pick. Like, that is pretty sharp dealing right there. They got 2 first-round picks and 72 games for a player or whatever, 75 games. I mean, really a good move for Montreal too.
Yeah, and from Winnipeg's standpoint, as you've identified here, they needed that level of experience, and I really think that it came down to the two guys, right? It was either Sean Monahan or Adam Henrique would have been in consideration from the Anaheim Ducks as well. And safe to say, and we're going to talk about Scotty Laughton here from the Flyers in just a moment, but a lot of really good feedback on Adam Henrique and the type of player that he is. But for Winnipeg's needs, maybe you get a little bit more offensive punch, would you say, from Monahan as opposed to Adam Henrique, who's described as a terrific pro?
Yeah, and a little more size, little more heft to Monahan. Like, he plays that way.
Right.
they both kind of skate the same. Like neither of them is going to, burn up and down the ice. They're both pretty clever players. Henrique's having a awesome run here, and I'll be shocked if he's in Anaheim past a couple of weeks here. And the other thing is, once these deals happen, they seem to happen in clusters.
True.
And so, you brought up Sean Monahan, or you brought up Scott Laughton, and now you bring up Henrique, and there's not 15 centers around. These are probably the next two.
So Laughton's name is out there, but we always qualify this. I mean, of course he's important to the Philadelphia Flyers. We touched on Boone Jenner at the All-Star. Teams are calling relentlessly, bugging Yarmo. Is there any way Boone Jenner could be in play here? Well, very, very, very unlikely unless somebody tables something ridiculous, on Boone Jenner, and then you consider it. That's what you have to do in the business of being a general manager. Laughton's a little bit different, right? So Philadelphia is listening, but they're not super motivated to trade him. Teams are calling. So Philadelphia head coach John Tortorella, Ray, we know he has a seat at that boardroom table alongside Danny Briere, the general manager, and Keith Jones, the president. He was asked as head coach yesterday to describe Scott Laughton's game right now.
Inconsistent. Yeah, inconsistent. When he's on, he's on. A little, you can tell by where I put him in the lines. Sometimes he's getting minutes, sometimes he isn't. But I think with the last third here, I think he knows how important the games are. I'm hoping he steps up and just get on the right side of consistency, because it's there. He's a very important guy for us.
All right, so he didn't bury him, but and he went on to describe Scott Laughton as a top leader and quote unquote glue guy, right? So a very attractive piece. You're the general manager. Are you going to the coach after that and saying, "Okay, bud, like maybe don't be as honest, please"? Like we're just days outside of the March 8th trade deadline. We know you're frustrated with his level of consistency. We get that, but can you just keep that out of the media, please?
Well, if you're going to go to him and say, "Could you be a little less open and honest?" How many times are you having that conversation with Torts? Like every Tuesday, so. And those teams that are doing what Philly is, which is at one point they seemed like they were going to be building, like builders, and then all of a sudden they have this great run and they're, oh my gosh, they're in a playoff race. So they're trying to walk a line here the whole time. So in a sense, Torts is walking that line right now. He's like, he wants Laughton to play better, and he's, the inconsistency thing. Knowing at the same time, if he plays better, then helps the Flyers, but also probably, more teams are going to call, or teams are going to intensify their calls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Laughton fits in a lot of ways with teams that are looking for a player lower down the lineup, like in that bottom six, like your third line center. That's kind of the place where Laughton seems to fit in my vision anyway. And so, that's we're not talking about a first rounder and a prospect and all that sort of stuff, but it still can be an important deal for them to make, especially the closer it gets to the deadline. Dregs, you talk to the guys, the managers and the agents all the time. The prices aren't going down. I mean, like they're climbing, and then there's a point right on deadline day where they're like, if we're going to make this deal, then the deals, they kind of go one of two ways. The price plummets, or it takes one last spike, and it's a bit of a game of bluff, right? That they're trying to play right to the end.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have tons of trade talk here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast leading up to March 8th. So just be ready for that. And it goes beyond speculation from this point forward. Right now, we get to the place where, we can absolutely connect the dots, and it's not just about the pieces in play. Okay, Ray, let's wrap up Tim Hortons headlines with international hockey. 2025, 2026 just got a lot busier for you with the announcement of 4 nations and the return of the NHL to the Winter Olympics in Italy in 2026. It's great for hockey.
It really is. 25's busier for sure. We don't know about 26, what's going on, who's broadcasting, who's doing all of that things. But so next year, I think it's a 7 games is what it's going to turn out to be. I heard, am I right with it's Montreal and Boston, or is that decided yet? Or
I don't know that it's officially signed off on, but
so it's going to be a Canadian city and a U.S. city.
Yes.
And so we'll do, I assume, a good chunk of that. So what was the All-Star game will be this, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, like there's always, David Pasternak said, Czechia is not in it. I'm really disappointed and disappointed we can't watch him play because he's fabulous to watch. And certainly while the international community figures out what's going to be the road forward with Russia, the Russians aren't involved. And, so the Swedes and the Finns, Canadians and the US, and that'll be fun to watch. I think it'll be a nice little taster for the Olympics the next year. And there's not a player around that is going to be involved that won't be excited about that.
I know the NHL had an idea that would have incorporated star players like David Pasternak, Leon Draisaitl, those type of kind of global hockey stars. It was shot down by the Players Association. So I don't know the details. I'm not sure of exactly what was being proposed, but just to qualify why it might have been shot down. Okay, there might be a handful of those players that would love to play, in that environment, but they want to play for their countries. They don't want to come in as a sidebar, as just kind of a showcase. They want to be part of the actual event. So I think rightly the Players Association pushed back and said, you know what? No, let's just leave it for now. Let these guys enjoy their break. And hopefully, as the Four Nations eventually morphs into a World Cup of Hockey, then at that point, we'll be able to bring the rest of some of the hockey superpowers back into play. So that would make some sense.
It would. I mean, the hybrid team, whatever you call it, like it just doesn't feel right.
No,
like they're all kind of lumped together there. It makes it feel, I think, a team like that, like an exhibition.
I don't even think it was a team though, Ray. I think it was like literally just a handful of these guys coming in for maybe another version of a skills competition, something along those lines.
No, you don't need that. No, you don't need that. No, let's play the games.
No. All right. Those are your headlines. Thank you to our good friends at Tim Hortons.
Your favorite retro donuts are back from the past. And with our 20-minute fresh coffee, what's classic is always fresh.
So good.
It's time for retro donuts. It's time for Tim's.
It's time for Tim's.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs brought to us by Canadian Club Whiskey. The first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series is out there, the CC 15-year-old Sherry Cask. All the hallmarks of classic Canadian Club with the added richness and sweetness of sherry. Ask Ray and Dregs anything. Boy, had fun with this one, man. He just, he's kind of rapid fire sort of things. He didn't know what was coming, but he was just fully engaged. You can send your questions to us on our socials, on X and Instagram at Ray and Dregs, or on the website rayanddregs.com. Okay, the first one from Jeff. I don't think it's Jeff O'Neill. No, it's not Jeff O'Neill. It's Jeff. Hello, Ray and Dregs, or perhaps O-Dog and Dregs these days. The All-Star Celebrity Captains, Ray, was fun, but what do you think about making the captains ex-greats from the host city's team? A game in Toronto, so one of the captains would have been Matt Sundin, another Doug Gilmour, Wendell Clark, maybe Darcy Tucker. If the game is in St. Louis, you've got Oates, you've got Pronger, you've got McInnes, you've got Ferraro. They will all compete in the skills competition and then would help coach in the games. And he says, thanks, guys. Absolutely love the pod. By far my favorite hockey podcast. What do you think of the idea?
Well, I'm on board till they said about them competing, and somehow I might have to compete. Oof, nobody wants to see that anymore. That's a good idea. Why not? Anytime you can connect past to present, sure.
Yeah.
The fans would love to see, some of the greats of the of their local city involved.
Yeah. Sure.
I would be all for it. I gotta say, when in the skills they had Steve Thomas out there passing, so I sent him a text. I'm like, Stumpy, do not break anyone's ankles. Nobody could fire a rocket pass off someone's ankle like Stump. And so, and he said, no, I'm going to get him flat here. So it was kind of neat. Doug Gilmore was out there passing, and Sarah Nurse was passing, and I like that stuff because I think it's a fun part of the deal. But I honestly I think it's a good idea. But I liked what they did this time.
The little net event that stresses me out. That gives me anxiety. I can't even imagine being the player participating in that because Cale Makar made it look pedestrian, right? He made it look super easy. And then I'm like, once you miss the first 4 or 5 shots, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, Matt. They had to bring out more pucks for Matt Barzal. That's brutal.
Terrible.
But so as I was walking into the rink on Saturday, I walked past like this little storage area, and the little nets were there.
Yeah.
So I stopped and looked at them, and I'm like, those skinny ones, they're not wide.
No.
And the wide one looks pretty wide, except you're 20 feet from it.
Yeah.
I was like, man, those things are pretty narrow. And you're right, once you miss a couple, I'm sure, I know it, your heart starts going a little faster. You're squeezing it a bit. And Matt Barzal's a fabulous passer, and he could have been there for a month. And it was like, oh my God, poor guy. Put one in, would you?
All right, one more, and Ask Ray and Dregs from Todd. And this kind of bookends this episode of the Ray and Dregs podcast. So he says, listening to O-Dog talk about Ray's chirping him as a player made me wonder, is there a line, Ray, regarding things that can be said to an opponent, and are some things off limits? Now, there's a second part to this question, but let's start with, there would be things that are off limits, right? Family,
sure.
Mothers, fathers, wives.
For sure. The line probably was a little wider back in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Because of no microphones and
sensibilities. It was a wider playing field. And there really, I don't hear a lot of chirping. I'm on the ice. I don't hear a lot from the guys. And I think they're all, I know they're all pretty cognizant as there's mics everywhere. And everybody wants to know the chirps, but if they heard some of them, they probably wouldn't be that thrilled.
Yeah.
Because it's not a pat on the back society, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing that I do think, and this isn't just with, he's asking about chirps, but also about when guys retaliate on the ice. If you look at it from, your couch or from, 100 feet above the ice, you lose the emotion of what's happening. It would be nice to say, okay, everybody's got to take a half a breath and then let emotion settle and then go ahead. That just doesn't happen. And that's why some guy turns around and swats somebody with their glove or slashes somebody when they shouldn't, is because emotion's taken over. And that's just part of it.
Okay. The second part of Todd's question is, as parents and youth coaches, how should we balance the lessons of sportsmanship and respect for opponents with reality that, chirping is part of the sport at almost every level? I know where Todd's going with this, and he asks, how do you handle this, or how did we handle this with our own kids, in varying sports? But there is a significant difference between professional sport and amateur sport. And I think for the most part, minor hockey, minor sport, amateur sport does a nice job maybe could do a better job, but does a effective job of trying to police this as much as possible. So you go first. Did you ever have experiences or situations where you had to handle this with your own kids?
Not verbal stuff.
Yeah.
Temper tantrum stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which, of course, when I look back, I'm like, well, gee, I wonder where they learned that from. Like I remember a game in Atlanta, and Landon would have been maybe 10, and he went back and slammed his stick against the boards, and I was across the ice, and I just yelled, "Hey!" And he knew. And as I thought about it, I'm like, gee, I wonder where he saw that. Like that. Of course, it was it was me, but not the verbal stuff. Here's what I do think. I think they do a good job, as far as I can tell, in minor hockey and minor sports. It can always be better.
Yeah.
It can always be better, and that should be the goal. Is that I think there's certainly more awareness of it today than there was 5 years ago, and certainly 10 and 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean we're at the finish line. So keep pushing to improve. A lot of the sportsmanship stuff honestly falls to the parents and the coaches.
Yeah.
And it might be unfair to the coaches at some point, because if the parents aren't supporting it at home, then you've got a real problem. Mm-hmm. But the coaches have to realize that if they're screaming at the officials, the kids are going to scream at the officials. If it's a bad call, you can say to your team, guys, we don't like that call, but it's already made, so let's play.
Right.
Like, I think that's how you start continually reinforcing that there's a way to play. It doesn't mean you're going to be happy with it all the time, but you have to conduct yourself in a sportsmanlike manner, because that's how the game is played.
An excellent topic by Todd. And we'll leave it at this, but I'm sure that you had the same experience. The only thing that bothered me when Mason was playing hockey was when the players would grab the low-hanging fruit, which is me, right? And I remember one experience. He was playing midget hockey, and Chris Secord, who was the trainer/assistant coach, he's losing it on the bench. Mason's standing by the door, and some kid says something to him on the bench, and the linesman is standing right there. And the opposing kid said something grotesque about me to Mason. And the reason that this coach trainer is losing it is because he knows the official heard what this kid said at 16, 17 years of age and did nothing about it. That was the stuff that always pissed me off. Individually, my kid ran hot. I got it. I'm sure he said terrible things out there as well. But when you hear that stuff, that's part of the responsibility of, being a leader in an association, or to a point, being an official on the ice. Sometimes you just got to react.
We ask a lot from the officials, for sure.
Yeah.
And when 30 parents are screaming at them all night, they might just go, you know what? Screw it. I just want this game to end.
For sure.
I'm not getting paid enough here to step into this landmine.
No.
And so we can talk about it in theory and say, oh, this should happen and this should happen. But if minor sports want to improve, the people that want to improve should look in the mirror first.
Yep.
And I can say that almost with certainty, I'm trying to think of a time I would have yelled at an official. Never.
Good for you.
But like fuming about something.
For sure.
But it's such madness in there. I get the emotion. There is nothing more emotional than watching your son or daughter play sports. There is nothing.
Yeah.
Because you want them to do so well. And it is a landmine around the corner all the time. And so in every instance, I look at the parent or the adult and say, you're the one that's got to fix this, not the kid.
What a question from Todd. And the second
It's a great
part of the
question.
Yeah, it was, because it takes us from the world of pro hockey, the chirping that maybe isn't as prevalent today as it once was back in the day, to the stuff that really matters, which is going on in youth sport.
And you know what? And it's a great topic to talk about, because the more people that talk about it, somebody might have a better idea.
Yeah.
Right. And if they do, like, then it's okay. Well, let's take that idea and maybe we can implement it in our local association. Maybe it becomes better closer to home. Maybe that spreads a little. I mean, that's the way things happen. That's what grassroots is.
All right, Todd, thank you. Jeff, thank you. Ray, what's the week like, my friend? Where are you off to?
I'm actually in studio in Bristol on Thursday, which has never happened.
Cushy gig, yeah.
Yeah, well, you studio guys, people feed you. It's nice and warm. You get the. I have a little trouble getting around the ESPN campus. It's a rather large place, and I had trouble, as you know, getting from building 1 to building 2.
Yeah, I get it.
At TSN, so that was a trouble enough. So I'm there Thursday, and then Saturday I'm in Boston for Washington.
Okay, good.
Washington just. I see Kuznetsov is out in player assistance program. And, and so the Capitals will be trying to manage their way through as they try to hang around a playoff spot. And the Bruins, I don't know, they just never lose. So I think they got 9 losses this year. And so we'll be in there on Saturday, home Sunday for the Super Bowl.
Excellent. All right. Well, safe travels. And
what about you?
Yeah, you know what? It's Super Bowl week. James Duthie is in Vegas.
He got a
Apparently
nice
arrived.
room out in Vegas, eh?
Yeah, apparently checked in to whatever the Vegas hotel is, got into his room, and his tub is full of water. I'm getting a penthouse suite if that happens to me, man.
Why does that just gross you out?
Jesus. Like, what is going on?
Get me out of there.
So, all right, you'll be in the East, so that'll work well for the next episode of Ray and Dregs, so we'll likely check back on Thursday.
Yep, talk Thursday, and thanks for listening, everybody. Good to be back.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you to our sponsors, our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, and as always, Tim Hortons. Thank you. And thank you for listening, for rating, for sharing the podcast, and especially for following us on the Ray and Dregs YouTube channel. Until next time, stay safe, everybody.